Most of the great hunters that I know break the rules every single time they go out. And I'm not talking about the legal ones. I'm talking about the ones that nobody questions. So every good hunter that I've actually met, one that is successful by their own standards and by my standards as well, has one thing in common, and that's that they adapt to every situation that they face. Whereas on the flip side of that, the bad hunters or the non-successful hunters, and I don't mean that in a sense of they're not harvesting animals, I mean that in a sense where I wouldn't take their advice. They're following rules and dogma that have been established as someone else's solution to whatever circumstances that they might be facing. And they take that rule that has been implemented and they treat it like the gospel, and they treat it like if they derail from that advice, that there's just simply no way that they can become successful while hunting. And there's so many of these rules that I see on the internet, whether it's here on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook or wherever it is, that just simply aren't always true. Now, in the situation that they were in when they were implemented and whenever said hunter mentioned the rule, yes, it was very applicable in that situation. But to sit here and think that it's the only way to be successful is just simply not the case. Take, for instance, morning hunting. I hear folks say that during late season, you should only hunt mornings, or during turkey season, you should only hunt mornings, and so on and so forth. And that's not true. And anyone who's ever spent any amount of time in the woods knows that it is not always true. Now, granted, are there times where mornings are going to be more productive, or that the animal is going to be moving more? Of course there are. But if we sit here and we say, this is the only way you can be successful, then we limit ourselves to what we can actually accomplish in the woods. On the flip side of that, I hear people talking that during the early season, you should only hunt evenings. And I'm here to tell you that I have capitalized on some nice mature deer early mornings when it comes to early season hunting. It all depends on the property that you're hunting, the pressure that they're feeling, the situations that are presented to you, and a lot of times it also depends on how much time you have as the hunter to get a field. Sometimes you have to work night shift and mornings is all you have, so you're not going to be successful at all if evening hunts is the only thing that you can do to be a successful hunter. I also hear to never hunt the same spot twice, and I understand, again, all of these tips and tricks, they have validity to them from the place that they were presented from, but it is not always the gospel. When we hear to never hunt the same place twice, it usually has to do with pressure, putting your presence in, and it's mostly applicable to deer hunting, but we're talking about putting our pressure, putting our scent, putting our presence, being known to the animal in the spot. Well, yes, I understand that, and I understand the principle of it, but if we rewind a little bit and bring back our woodsmanship skills, and we plan how we're going to enter the woods, and we plan how we're going to leave the woods, and we plan to hunt the wind properly, all of these things factor in, and this is what actually gives us the opportunity to hunt twice. And on top of that, who says we're necessarily hunting the deer that busted us on any given day in the woods should we become busted? We have to stop and remember that every tip that we're given is only applicable in the situation that the tip was presented from. We also hear things like, don't move when you're set up, or if the wind is not absolutely perfect, there's no point in hunting. And although, again, all of these things have their own applications, we cannot treat them like it's the truth. If you're sitting in a spot and you know for a fact that you should have movement within a certain time window and that movement doesn't happen, who knows what happened before you got there or even after you got there. If something came in and bumped those deer, there's no point in sitting there, because then we can go back to the last tip of never hunting the same spot twice. We don't want to put too much of a presence in there if we don't have to. Everything that we're taught in the woods can be contradicting if we really stop and think about it, because each tip that gets presented Well, that tip cured it, and that tip cured it. Well, this makes this tip not applicable. We have to understand that every situation has a different solution. And at the end of the day, all these tips and tricks is tips. It is not the rules. Probably my least favorite tip that I hear, and I understand that it's just because we live in a consumer market, is you need to have X, Y, or Z gear to truly be successful. You need to have the latest, greatest bow. You need to have the latest, greatest tree stand. You need to have the latest, greatest turkey gun, turkey calls, whatever it may be. And that is not the answer. The answer is woodsmanship skills. 100 times out of 100, that is going to be the only true rule that you need to follow. And look, I get it. I understand why we make tips and tricks rules. I understand why whenever we see our favorite influencer on the internet or on a TV show say, this is how I did it on today's hunt, we want to make that a rule. Why? Because rules feel safe. They make us feel like we are in an organized situation that if we just mark the boxes off, we're going to end up with the end result that we want. And that is not the reality of hunting. The reality of hunting is that we have to think, we have to adapt, we have to roll with the punches per se. And that is uncomfortable because with the fact that we have to adapt comes the uncertainty that we might actually be unsuccessful more times than not. And that is the beauty of what this whole thing is. Let's face it, these rules are shortcuts. It's the easy way to go from A to B, and that is not inherently a bad thing. It helps beginners. Listen, if you are just getting into hunting, no matter what the species is, implement these rules to a certain extent because that builds the ground, that builds the foundation for which you need to build off of to actually learn the woodsmanship skills to be able to adapt in the future. You can't just go out there with zero knowledge whatsoever and, well, Jordan from Ammo said that I need to adapt. You don't know what adapting looks like at the time. So yes, I'm not saying to blow these rules out the window because in reality, the rules are situationally correct. If you were to take the exact same scenario in which whatever influencer told you to do whatever he or she told you to do, and you had it apples to apples, I guarantee you that the rule would be correct. It would be applicable. It would be what you needed to be successful. But how do we get apples to apples when we're hundreds of miles away from each other? We don't. How do we get apples to apples when we're hunting two completely different animals? We don't. You cannot get the exact same scenario every single time. So as I said, situationally, in his or her situation, when he or she presented it to you, that was the exact thing that needed to happen. For you, in your hunting scenarios, it is a ground rule. It is not the end all be all. Once you develop these skills, once you understand when you need to break away from the norm, that is when we can start to think about it. That is when we can start to question, well, do I really need to approach from the downwind in this situation? Do I really need to sit tight today? Do I really need this gear? Do I really need etc., etc., etc.? If we don't learn to question the rules, the advice can actually start to become harmful.
You're talking! Oh, Daddy just smushed his neck.
So what do the successful hunters do? What do the guys and gals who are constantly filling the back of their truck beds every season do? They learn to read conditions, not playbooks. You have to be able to roll with the punches per se. You have to understand what each scenario is presenting to you. And unfortunately, I can't tell you. That comes from woodsmanship skills. That comes from making the mistakes, getting busted, blowing a trophy class deer out, watching a gobbler putt and run away when he was 30 yards away and your shotgun was off safe and you were getting ready to pull the trigger. You have to make the mistakes to understand which scenario creates which tension and then in turn what the next move is. You have to be able to adjust in real time, not a week from now you think about it and then you're going to be able to repeat that exact scenario. In the moment, you have to know when and what to do. You have to know when those rules that you've been taught on the internet need to be broke, and you need to do it with intention. I talked earlier about hunting the wind is not always necessarily a perfection case. I can think back to when I was hunting a bedding area and I knew that if the wind was blowing the correct way, in other words, it was coming into my face, that the deer was not going to come out of that bedding area into my actual setup. Why would he? It made no sense. It gave him the disadvantage. So what I actually had to do is I had to put myself in a position where the wind was blowing just to the left of him, but still in his favor, not my favor. And I ended up capitalizing on that deer. Now, every other pro hunter or every other big influencer on the internet is going to tell you that what I did that morning wasn't completely wrong. It was the incorrect thing to do and that I would have never become successful. And by the book, they would be correct. If you actually think about how a deer works and how their survival instincts work and how their smelling works, their sense of smell works, yes, I was 100% in the wrong, but in that specific scenario, in that situation, in that very moment, breaking the rules was exactly what needed to happen to be able to take that deer home with me. Again, I'm not telling you that all these tips and tricks and all these rules are wrong. As a matter of fact, 90% of the time, the things that you are told are completely correct. When people say to hunt the thermals, yes, hunt the thermals. When people say to hunt the wind, when people say to keep pressure off the animal, all those things are correct. I am not saying that they are wrong. What I'm saying is you cannot be glued to them because there are times where you do have to deviate from them. So learn when the rules apply and when they don't. Experience will teach you when to follow these rules, and confidence will tell you when it's okay not to. Hunting forces adaptation. It forces you to bend and not break. When these animals start to feel pressure, which I don't care where you are, whether it's public or private, they're going to feel pressure, everything changes. Everything that they know, everything that is normal to them goes out the window. The guys following the rule book to a T, they don't mess anything up when it comes to being the perfect hunter. They become predictable. The animals know exactly what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. The adaptable hunter kills more animals, plain and simple. When it comes to pressured animals, the animal already knows the rule book. So it's the guy who's willing to break those rules that will inevitably win. I'm not sitting here telling you that everything you hear on the internet is wrong, because that would be a blatant lie. What I'm telling you is go out there and learn when you can be a rebel. I hope you took something good away from this video today. If you did, please leave me a like and a comment down below. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. And until next time, see you on the hill.